1966 was a date etched into their minds, a day that would either mark their freedom or their end. The rain was relentless, pounding on the tin roofs of the camp and cloaking the jungle in a thick, misty veil. It was the perfect cover. Dengler signaled his team with a subtle nod. There was no room for error. The guards, lulled into complacency by the monotony of their routine and the weather, were unprepared for what was about to unfold. The first phase of the plan involved creating chaos. One prisoner intentionally knocked over a water bucket, drawing the attention of the closest guard. Dengler seized the moment, silently slipping past to retrieve a hidden blade fashioned from scrap metal. Within moments, the group sprang into action. The guards were taken by surprise. Dengler and his comrades moved with swift precision, using their makeshift weapons to neutralize the immediate threats. The commotion drew other guards into the fray, but the prisoners had the advantage of surprise. Dengler's leadership and clear instructions kept the group from descending into panic. By the time the dust settled, several guards lay incapacitated, and the path to the jungle was open. They ran. The dense jungle swallowed them whole, its thick vegetation providing cover, but also slowing their progress. Each step was a battle against nature. Mud clung to their feet, roots tripped them, and the rain stung their skin. The prisoners moved as one, driven by a singular goal: to put as much distance as possible between themselves and the camp before dawn. However, freedom brought its own challenges. The unity that had bonded them in captivity began to waver under the strain of the escape. Disagreements erupted over direction, pace, and strategy. Some prisoners, weakened by months of malnourishment and disease, struggled to keep up. Dengler did his best to rally them, but the cracks in their cohesion were undeniable. By the third day, the group began to splinter. Exhaustion and fear took their toll, and tempers flared. Some prisoners chose to separate, believing they stood a better chance alone. Dengler and American fellow prisoner Dwayne Martin stuck together, convinced that their odds were better as a team. The jungle became their battlefield. They faced torrential downpours, venomous snakes, and the constant threat of recapture. Food was scarce, and their physical reserves dwindled rapidly. At night, the jungle came alive with the sounds of predators, reminding them that they were never truly safe. Despite the hardships, Dengler's resolve never faltered. He kept moving, dragging himself and Martin through the dense undergrowth, driven by the faint hope of finding salvation. Each step felt like an eternity, but turning back was not an option. As the days turned into weeks, the escape began to take on a grim reality. The jungle was as much their prison as the camp had been, and survival was a matter of sheer willpower. Yet through it all, Dengler remained unyielding. His refusal to give in became the spark that kept them both alive. At least for now. By the second week, Dengler and Martin were reduced to shadows of their former selves. Their bodies, ravaged by starvation, moved more out of instinct than strength. The jungle's endless expanse had become a cruel labyrinth. Each step forward seemed to lead them deeper into its grasp. Then came the day that would change everything. The two men stumbled upon a small clearing where a river snaked its way through the jungle. It was a rare sight, a moment of serenity in a world of chaos. Starving and desperate, they decided to rest briefly, hoping to catch fish or forage for something edible. But in the jungle, moments of reprieve were fleeting. As they crouched by the riverbank, a rustling sound in the bushes sent a chill down their spines. Both men froze. It wasn't an animal. Dengler instinctively reached for the makeshift weapon he had kept since the breakout. But before they could react, a group of villagers emerged from the thicket. The villagers, armed with machetes and rifles, surrounded them in an instant. Communication was impossible. Dengler tried to signal that they meant no harm, raising his hands in a gesture of surrender, but the villagers weren't interested in negotiations. They had been on high alert since the prisoners' escape and saw Dengler and Martin as enemies. In the chaos that followed, Dengler's worst fear became reality. One of the villagers attacked Martin, striking him down in a sudden violent moment. Dengler could only watch in horror as his friend collapsed, lifeless, onto the forest floor. Martin's death was swift, but agonizing in its finality. Dengler was now truly alone. With no time to grieve, Dengler acted on pure instinct. He threw himself into the dense underbrush, using the chaos to escape. The villagers shouted and fired blindly into the jungle, but Dengler's knowledge of the terrain and sheer determination kept him one step ahead. He ran until his legs gave out, collapsing into the mud as the sounds of pursuit faded into the distance. For the first time since his capture, Dengler was completely and utterly alone. The loss of Martin weighed heavily on him, but there was no time to process the grief. Survival demanded his full attention. The jungle offered no solace, no time to mourn. Every moment was a battle to keep moving, to stay alive. The loneliness was suffocating, but it also fueled him. With every step, Dengler made a silent promise to Martin. He would survive, not just for himself, but for the man who had shared his journey. As long as Dengler lived, Martin's sacrifice would not be in vain. Dengler pressed on, his body weakened but his spirit unbroken. The jungle seemed even more menacing now, its shadows deeper, its threats more immediate. But through it all, Dengler clung to the faint hope that somewhere beyond the trees, salvation awaited. By now, Dieter Dengler was little more than a walking skeleton. His body, battered and starved, teetered on the edge of collapse. Every step was a battle against the jungle, but his determination to survive burned brighter than ever. With Martin gone, he was truly alone, yet his will to live remained unshaken. After days of wandering with no direction, Dengler came across a small abandoned village nestled deep in the jungle. The huts were dilapidated, overgrown with vines and moss, but for Dengler, they represented a sliver of hope. Inside one of the structures, he found a rusty machete and scraps of cloth. The machete became his lifeline, allowing him to cut through the thick underbrush and fend off the jungle's relentless hazards. Dengler also scavenged for food in the village, finding small, rotting fruits and catching insects to sustain himself. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep him moving. Every bite reminded him of his fragile humanity, and every moment he spent in that village reinforced one truth: he had to find a way out. The discovery of an old parachute changed everything. Though tattered, it sparked an idea, a final gamble for survival. Using his Navy training, Dengler fashioned an SOS signal on an open patch of ground near the village, arranging the parachute material into large, crude letters. He knew it was a long shot, but it was all he had left. If an American aircraft passed overhead, the signal might be visible. To strengthen his chances, Dengler built a fire using dried wood and debris from the village. The smoke would serve as a beacon, a desperate call for rescue. Days passed with no sign of help, and Dengler's condition worsened. Yet he refused to let the fire go out, feeding it with every ounce of energy he had left. On July 20, 1966, Dengler's prayers were answered. A U.S. reconnaissance plane flew overhead, its faint roar cutting through the oppressive silence of the jungle. Summoning the last reserves of his strength, Dengler waved his arms frantically and threw fresh brush onto the fire, causing a plume of thick smoke to rise into the sky. The plane circled back, and Dengler's heart surged with hope. Moments later, the unmistakable sound of a rescue helicopter echoed through the trees. As the chopper descended, Dengler staggered into the clearing, waving his arms as tears streamed down his face. The rescuers could hardly believe their eyes, a man so emaciated and beaten, yet alive. The crew lifted Dengler into the helicopter, wrapping him in blankets and administering water and food. For the first time in over 3 weeks, Dengler felt safe. The jungle's nightmare was over, and he was going home. Dieter Dengler's survival was nothing short of miraculous. Weighing only 93 pounds and suffering from severe malnutrition, he was immediately hospitalized upon his return to the United States. Doctors were astonished by his resilience, But Dengler's ordeal had left scars far deeper than those visible on his body. His story quickly captured national attention, not just for its incredible detail, but for the indomitable spirit it represented. Dengler's ability to endure the unendurable became a symbol of human resilience, inspiring generations to come. Dieter Dengler's return to the world was met with both admiration and curiosity. He had endured a nightmare few could imagine and emerged with a story of unparalleled courage. Yet, Dengler himself remained humble. He often downplayed his heroism, insisting that his survival was not the result of extraordinary strength, but of an unrelenting will to live. In the years following his rescue, Dengler became a beacon of hope for those facing seemingly insurmountable odds. He shared his experiences with others, speaking at military and civilian events, emphasizing the power of the human spirit. His story wasn't just about escaping captivity. It was about refusing to let circumstances dictate his fate. And with that, we've reached the end of this extraordinary journey. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.